The rope bit into Sarah's wrists like fire, each gust of wind sending her body swaying against the gnarled oak tree. Blood trickled from where the coarse hemp had rubbed her skin raw, and her shoulders screamed in agony from supporting her weight for what felt like hours. The Texas sun beat down mercilessly on her face, and her lips were cracked and bleeding from thirst. She had stopped crying long ago. The tears had dried up somewhere between the moment her own neighbors had dragged her from her cabin and the sickening realization that no one was coming to save her. The accusations still rang in her ears. Witch, devil's spawn. She cursed the Miller boy, all because she had tried to heal young Timothy with the herbs her grandmother had taught her to use. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to remember. Her grandmother's gentle hands, the way she had shown her which plants could ease pain and which could bring down fever. But the memory was fading, replaced by the cruel faces of people she had once called friends. Mrs. Henderson, who had borrowed sugar from her just last week, had been the first to throw a stone. The settlement of Cedar Creek had been her home for 3 years, ever since her parents died of fever and left her the small cabin on the outskirts of town. She had kept to herself, tended her garden, and helped whoever needed it. But fear made people cruel, and when the Miller boy had taken ill after she had given him willow bark tea, fear had turned to fury. Please, she whispered to the empty prairie, though she wasn't sure if she was praying to God or begging for death. Her vision blurred as the sun climbed higher, and she felt consciousness slipping away like water through her fingers. It was then that she heard the HOOFBEATS. At first, she thought it was another hallucination brought on by the heat and pain, but the sound grew stronger, more rhythmic, accompanied by voices speaking in a language she didn't recognize. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she forced her eyes open, squinting against the harsh light. 3 riders approached from the east, their horses moving with fluid grace across the grassland. Even through her haze of pain, Sarah could see they were Comanche warriors. She recognized the distinctive way they sat their horses, as if they were born to the saddle. Her blood turned to ice. The settlers had told countless stories about Comanche raids, about captives taken and never seen again. But as they drew closer, Sarah found herself past caring about her fate. Death by Comanche lance might be swifter than slow strangulation in the Texas heat. She watched with detached curiosity as the lead rider raised his hand, bringing the small party to a halt just yards from the tree. The warrior who had signaled the stop was younger than she had expected, perhaps no more than 25, with long black hair braided with eagle feathers and strips of leather. His chest was bare except for a bone breastplate, and his dark eyes held an intelligence that seemed to pierce straight through her. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable, before turning to speak rapidly to his companions, in their native tongue. Sarah's vision was tunneling now, the edges of the world going dark. The last thing she saw before unconsciousness claimed her was the young warrior dismounting from his horse, his movements fluid and purposeful as he approached the tree where she hung. Sarah awoke to the sensation of cool water on her lips and gentle hands supporting her head. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. The pain in her shoulders had eased, and she was lying on something soft instead of hanging from the oak tree. But as her eyes fluttered open, she found herself staring into the face of the Comanche warrior who had found her up close. His features were even more striking than she had glimpsed before losing consciousness. His skin was the color of burnished copper, stretched taut over high cheekbones and a strong jaw. But it was his eyes that captured her attention, dark as storm clouds, yet somehow warm, as they regarded her with what looked like genuine concern. "Easy," he said in heavily accented English, his voice deep and surprisingly gentle. "You are safe now." Sarah tried to sit up, but her body protested violently. Every muscle ached, and her wrists were wrapped in what looked like soft buckskin bandages. She was lying on a buffalo hide in the shade of the same oak tree where she had nearly died. But now it offered comfort instead of torment. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice hoarse as sandpaper. "I am called Ayana," he replied, offering her more water from a leather pouch. "It means eternal blossom in your tongue. My mother gave me this name because I was born in the spring, when the wildflowers covered the prairie." He paused, studying her face. "What is your name, white woman?" "Sarah," she managed, accepting the water gratefully. "Sarah Whitmore." Ayana nodded, as if committing the name to memory. "Why did your people leave you to die, Sarah Whitmore?" The question brought back the horror of the morning, and Sarah felt tears threatening again. They thought I was a witch. I tried to help a sick boy, but he got worse, and they blamed me." Something flickered in Ayana's dark eyes. Not surprise. but recognition. Your people fear what they do not understand. This is not the first time I have seen such foolishness. He settled back on his heels, his movements graceful despite his size. My grandmother was a medicine woman. She taught me that healing comes from understanding the balance between all living things. The white settlers, they see only what they want to see. Sarah struggled to process what was happening. She had been prepared to die, convinced that the Comanche would either kill her or take her as a slave. Instead, she found herself being tended to by a warrior who spoke of balance and understanding, with the wisdom of someone much older than his years. Your companions, she said, suddenly noticing that they were alone. Where are they? I sent them back to our village, Ayana replied. They wanted to leave you, but I could not. My grandmother taught me that all life is sacred, and that the spirits sometimes put us in each other's paths for reasons we cannot yet understand. The afternoon sun was beginning to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Sarah realized she should be afraid. She was alone with a Comanche warrior, miles from any settlement, with no one to help her if his intentions proved dangerous. But somehow, she felt safer than she had in months. What will you do with me? She asked. Ayana was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant as he looked out over the prairie. That depends on you, Sarah Whitmore. You cannot return to your people. They have shown you what they think of you. But you are not meant to die on this tree either. Perhaps the spirits have other plans. As if to punctuate his words, a red-tailed hawk circled overhead, its cry echoing across the grassland. Sarah watched it soar effortlessly on the evening breeze and felt something shift inside her chest. A loosening of the fear and despair that had gripped her heart since dawn. For the first time in years, she felt truly free. 3 days passed, in a strange, gentle rhythm that Sarah had never experienced before. Ayana had fashioned a shelter from buffalo hides and cottonwood branches, creating a comfortable space where she could rest while her body healed from the ordeal. He tended to her wounds with a skill that rivaled any doctor she had ever known, using plants and herbs that he gathered from the prairie, with the practiced eye of someone who had learned from a master. Your grandmother taught you well, Sarah observed on the third morning, watching as he prepared a poultice from prairie sage and wild mint. His hands moved with sure, steady confidence as he worked. She was the wisest woman I ever knew, Ayana replied, his voice carrying a note of deep affection. She said that the earth provides everything we need, if we know how to listen to her voice. He looked up at Sarah with those penetrating dark eyes. You have this knowledge too, I think. The way you speak of helping the sick boy, that was not witchcraft. That was wisdom. Sarah felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her with respect instead of fear or suspicion. My grandmother taught me some things about healing herbs, but I'm nothing compared to a real medicine woman. Knowledge is not about comparison, Ayana said gently, settling beside her to apply the poultice to her healing wrists. It is about understanding, and you understand more than you know. As he worked, Sarah found herself studying his face, noting the concentration in his expression, the gentle way he handled her injuries. Everything about him contradicted the stories she had heard about Comanche warriors, tales of savage brutality, and merciless raids. This man was thoughtful, intelligent, and possessed of a kindness that seemed to run deeper than mere politeness. Why? Are you helping me? She asked suddenly. I mean, really helping me. Your people, and mine. We're not exactly friends. Ayana's hand stilled for a moment, and when he looked up, his expression was serious. My people have suffered much at the hands of white settlers. We have lost our hunting grounds, our sacred places, our families. There is much anger, much pain on both sides. He resumed his work, his touch remaining gentle, despite the weight of his words. But anger does not heal wounds, it only creates new ones. So you're helping me too. ... What? Make peace. I am helping you because you needed help, he said simply. And because when I saw you hanging from that tree, I saw not a white woman or an enemy, but a person in pain. My grandmother taught me that the spirit sees no color, only the heart. Beneath that afternoon, as Sarah's strength continued to return, Ayana began teaching her about the plants that grew wild on the prairie. He showed her how to identify buffalo berry bushes, how to distinguish between healing and harmful varieties of sage, and how to read the signs that told him which roots would be ready for harvest. The white man's way is to take what he wants from the earth, he explained, kneeling beside a patch of wild onions. Our way is to take only what we need, and always give something back. Balance. Sarah knelt beside him, watching as he carefully dug up a few of the bulbs while leaving the rest to continue growing. What do you give back? Prayers, tobacco. Sometimes our own blood, when the spirits require it. He glanced at her. But mostly, we give respect. We remember that we are part of the earth, not its masters. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, they sat together by the small fire Ayana had built. The evening air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of prairie grass and wildflowers. Sarah found herself more at peace than she had been in years, despite the uncertainty of her situation. I have to ask, she said quietly. What happens now? I can't go back to Cedar Creek, and I can't stay here forever. Ayana was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. There is a place, he said finally. A valley 2 days' ride north of here, where a stream runs clear, and the grass grows tall. It is on the edge of our territory, but we do not hunt there often. A person could build a life there, if they were willing to live simply. Alone. He turned to look at her, and in his dark eyes she saw something that made her heart skip. That would be up to you, Sarah Whitmore. But no one has to be alone if they do not choose to be. The valley was everything Ayana had promised and more. A clear stream wound through its center like a silver ribbon, flanked by cottonwoods and willows that provided blessed shade from the prairie sun. The grass grew knee-high in places, dotted with wildflowers that painted the landscape in brilliant blues, yellows, and reds. It was a place that seemed untouched by the conflicts raging across the Texas frontier. A pocket of peace in a world gone mad with fear and hatred. Sarah stood at the valley's edge, her heart swelling with something she had almost forgotten how to feel: hope. Beside her, Ayana sat easily on his painted horse, watching her reaction with those dark, knowing eyes. It's beautiful, she whispered, and the words seemed inadequate for the emotion filling her chest. The stream never runs dry, even in the worst droughts, Ayana said. And the soil is rich, good for growing things. Over the next several days, he helped her establish the beginnings of a new life. Together, they built a small cabin from logs, cut from the cottonwoods, chinked with mud and prairie grass. It was simple but sturdy, with a stone fireplace and one room that felt more like home than her old cabin in Cedar Creek ever had. Ayana taught her to fish with a bone hook and sinew line, showing her the pools where the trout liked to hide during the heat of the day. He showed her which berries were safe to eat, and which would make her sick, how to preserve meat by smoking it over a slow fire, and how to read the signs that told when winter was approaching. You learn quickly, he observed one evening, as they sat by the stream, watching the sunset paint the water gold. Your grandmother would be proud. I had a good teacher, Sarah replied, very aware of how close he was sitting to her. Over the past weeks, she had come to know the sound of his laugh, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the careful way he moved through the world as if he were always listening for something the rest of humanity had forgotten how to hear. Sarah, he said suddenly, his voice serious. I must tell you something. My people ... They know about you, about what I have done. Her heart clenched with sudden fear. Are they angry? Some are. They say I have gone soft, that I care too much for the white woman. Others ... double quotes. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Others say that the spirits work in mysterious ways, and that perhaps there is a reason you and I found each other. And what do you say? Ayana turned to look at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. I say that I have never met anyone like you, Sarah Whitmore. You are brave and kind and wise, and you see the world with eyes that look past the surface to the truth beneath. When I am with you, I feel like I am exactly where I am meant to be. Sarah's pulse quickened. She had been hoping, wondering, dreaming that what she felt for this remarkable man might be reciprocated. But hearing him say it aloud made her heart soar and terrify her at the same time. Ayana, she whispered, and then found herself unable to continue. I know, he said softly. I know it is complicated. I know that my people and yours are at war, that there are those who would see our caring for each other as betrayal. But I also know that what I feel for you is real, and good, and worth fighting for. He reached out and took her hand, his fingers warm and strong as they intertwined with hers. I do not ask you to decide anything tonight. I only ask that you know the truth of my heart. Sarah looked down at their joined hands, marveling at how right it felt. His skin was darker than hers, marked by sun and wind, and the outdoor life he had always lived. But beneath the surface differences, she could feel the steady rhythm of his pulse, the warmth of his blood, the humanity that made him more like her than different. I care for you too, she said quietly. More than I thought possible. When I was hanging from that tree, I thought my life was over. But you didn't just save my life, Iona. You showed me what it could be. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear overhead, still holding hands, both aware that they were standing at the edge of something that would change everything. In the distance, a coyote howled, and somewhere in the darkness, an owl called out its haunting song. There will be challenges, Iona said finally. People who will not understand. Let them not understand, Sarah replied, surprised by the strength in her own voice. I spent too many years trying to live by other people's rules, trying to be what they wanted me to be. I'm tired of being afraid. The first real test came 3 weeks later, when a party of Comanche warriors rode into the valley. Sarah was gathering herbs near the stream when she heard the thunder of hoofbeats and looked up to see 8 riders approaching at full gallop. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she recognized the stern face of the lead rider, an older man with silver-streaked hair and scars that told of many battles. Iona emerged from the cabin, his posture alert but not defensive. He spoke rapidly in Comanche to the lead rider, who Sarah realized must be someone of importance within the tribe. The conversation was heated, with much gesturing towards Sarah, who stood frozen by the stream, unsure whether to run or stand her ground. Finally, Iona called out to her, "Sarah, come here. Do not be afraid. This is my uncle, Chief Nokoni. He wishes to meet you." Sarah's legs felt weak as she approached the group of warriors. Their faces were painted for war, and their eyes held the cold assessment of men who had seen too much violence. But she had learned to trust Iona's judgment, and she forced herself to walk steadily toward them. Chief Nokoni studied her for a long moment, his weathered face giving nothing away. When he spoke, his English was better than Iona's though, heavily accented. "You are the white woman my nephew saved from the hanging tree." "Yes," Sarah replied, lifting her chin despite her fear. "I am Sarah Whitmore. My nephew tells me you are not like other white women, that you have the gift of healing, and that you understand the balance of all things." His dark eyes were shrewd, measuring. "But I have heard such claims before. Words are easy. Truth is harder." Without warning, Chief Nokoni dismounted and walked to where his horse stood, favoring its left front leg. "My horse took a stone in his hoof 3 days ago. I removed it, but the foot is still tender. If you have the gift my nephew claims, he'll him." Sarah's mouth went dry. She had some experience with horses, but she had never claimed to be a veterinarian. Still, she could see the challenge in the chief's eyes. The test that would determine not just her fate, but Iona's as well. "I'll try," she said quietly. She approached the horse slowly, speaking in the soft, soothing tones her father had taught her to use around animals. The horse was magnificent, a paint stallion with intelligent eyes and a spirit that seemed barely contained. As she ran her hands down his leg, she could feel the heat of inflammation in the hoof. "I'll need some things," she said, looking up at Chief Nokoni. "Willow bark, if you have it, and some clean water." Iona quickly gathered what she needed, and Sarah went to work. She cleaned the hoof carefully, applying a poultice of willow bark and wild mint to reduce the inflammation. As she worked, she spoke quietly to the horse, her hands gentle but confident. "The stone caused some bruising," she explained as she worked. "The willow bark will help with the pain and swelling. He should be sound in a few days, but he needs rest." Chief Nokoni watched her work with shrewd eyes. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "You have gentle hands and a quiet spirit. These are good qualities in a healer." He paused, studying her face. "But healing horses is not the same as healing people, and being able to heal does not make you one of us." "I'm not trying to become one of you," Sarah said, surprising herself with her boldness. "I'm trying to build a life here, in this valley, with your nephew. I know I'm white, and I know your people have suffered because of my people. But I also know that Iona and I care for each other, and that should count for something." The chief's expression remained impassive, but Sarah thought she saw a flicker of something. Approval, perhaps, in his dark eyes. "My nephew has made his choice," he said finally. "But choices have consequences. If you remain here, if you take him as your husband, you will be caught between two worlds. The white settlers will see you as a traitor, and some of my people will never fully accept you. Are you prepared for that?" Sarah looked at Iona, who was watching the exchange with tense attention. In his eyes, she saw love, hope, and fear all mixed together. She thought of her old life in Cedar Creek, of the loneliness and fear that had defined her existence there, and then she thought of the peace she had found in this valley, with this remarkable man. "I'm prepared," she said firmly. "I'd rather face the future with Iona than face it alone." Chief Nokoni nodded slowly. Then you have my blessing, white woman. But know this, you will be tested again, and not all the tests will be as simple as healing a horse's hoof. As the war party prepared to leave, Chief Nokoni spoke quietly to Ayana in Comanche. Sarah caught only a few words, but she saw the concern in the older man's face, the weight of responsibility he was placing on his nephew's shoulders. After they were gone, Sarah and Ayana sat by the stream as the sun set, both aware that something fundamental had shifted in their relationship. What did he say to you? Sarah asked. He said that love is not always enough, Ayana replied quietly, that there are storms coming, and we must be strong enough to weather them together. The ceremony took place on a crisp autumn morning when the cottonwoods along the stream had turned golden and the air carried the first hint of winter's approach. It was nothing like the weddings Sarah had attended in Cedar Creek, with their formal vows and elaborate dresses. Instead, it was a simple, sacred ritual that felt more meaningful than any ceremony she had ever witnessed. Ayana had spent days preparing, gathering special herbs and materials, according to Comanche tradition. He had also spoken with the tribal elders, seeking their guidance on how to properly bind his life to that of a white woman. Some had been skeptical, others outright hostile. But Chief Nokoni's blessing had carried weight, and eventually, a compromise had been reached. The morning of the ceremony, Sarah woke to find Ayana already gone. She found him by the stream, his long black hair braided with eagle feathers and decorated with beads that caught the morning light. He wore traditional Comanche wedding attire, a buckskin shirt, decorated with intricate quillwork, and leggings that reached to his knees. You look beautiful, she said, meaning it. In his native dress, with his hair styled in the traditional way, he looked like a prince from another world. As do you, he replied, his eyes warm as they took in her appearance. She had chosen her best dress, a simple blue calico that brought out the color of her eyes, and had braided wildflowers into her hair at his suggestion. The ceremony itself was conducted by an elderly medicine woman named Bright Moon, who had traveled from the main village specifically for this occasion. She was ancient, with white hair that hung to her waist, and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries. Despite her advanced age, her voice was strong and clear, as she spoke in both Comanche and English, ensuring that both bride and groom understood the sacred nature of the vows they were making. Marriage is not just the joining of two people, Bright Moon intoned, her weathered hands moving in ritual gestures over a small fire that had been built beside the stream. It is the weaving together of two spirits, two paths, two destinies. It requires courage, wisdom, and above all, the willingness to put the good of the partnership above your own desires. She had Sarah and Ayana stand facing each other, their hands joined, while she smudged them with burning sage and offered prayers to the four directions. The smoke rose in lazy spirals, carrying their promises up to the sky. Ayana, son of the people, Bright Moon said, turning to him first. Do you take this woman to be your wife, to share your lodge, your hunts, your sorrows, and your joys? Do you promise to protect her, honor her, and walk beside her on the path of life? I do, Ayana replied, his voice steady and strong. I promise to love her with all my heart, to stand by her in times of trouble, and to help her find her place among the people. Sarah, daughter of the white settlers, Bright Moon continued. Do you take this man to be your husband, to share his struggles, his triumphs, and his way of life? Do you promise to honor the ways of his people, to be a bridge between two worlds, and to walk beside him on the path of life? I do, Sarah said, her voice clear despite the tears that had begun to flow down her cheeks. I promise to love him with all my heart, to learn from his wisdom, and to help build a future where love matters more than the color of our skin. Bright Moon nodded approvingly and began the final part of the ceremony. She produced a length of beautifully woven rope made from horsehair and decorated with colored beads. This she wrapped around their joined hands, binding them together while speaking in rapid Comanche. The binding cord represents the unbreakable connection between your souls, she explained in English. It is woven from the hair of horses, which are sacred to our people because they carry us on life's journey. The beads represent the many moments of joy and sorrow you will share together. As the cord was wrapped around their hands, Sarah felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she belonged, not in the narrow, fearful world of Cedar Creek, but here in this valley, with this man who had seen her true self and loved her for it. The ceremony concluded with the sharing of food and water, symbolic of their commitment to sustain each other through all of life's challenges. They ate from the same bowl and drank from the same cup, their eyes never leaving each other's faces. As the sun reached its zenith, Bright Moon declared them husband and wife. According to Comanche law, the handful of tribal members who had come to witness the ceremony offered their congratulations, though Sarah could see the reservation in some of their faces. "Now you are truly one of us," Bright Moon said to Sarah, as the guests began to disperse. "But remember, being one of the people is not about blood or birthplace. It is about living in harmony with the natural world, respecting the spirits, and putting the good of the community above your own desires." That evening, as Sarah and Ayana sat by their fire as husband and wife, she felt a peace she had never known before. The challenges Chief Nokani had warned her about were still ahead, but she felt ready to face them. She had found her place in the world, and more importantly, she had found her home. "No regrets?" Ayana asked softly, taking her hand in his. "None," she replied without hesitation. "Only gratitude." Above them, the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled its ancient song of wildness and freedom. The first snow of winter had just begun to fall when the riders appeared on the ridge overlooking the valley. Sarah spotted them first, her blood running cold as she recognized the familiar silhouettes of white settlers. She counted 8 men, all heavily armed, their faces hard with the kind of determination that spoke of violence to come. "Ayana," she called softly, not wanting to alarm him, but needing him to see what she was seeing. He emerged from the cabin, his movements fluid and alert as they always were when danger threatened. One look at the riders on the ridge told him everything he needed to know. "Get inside," he said quietly, his hand moving instinctively to the knife at his belt. "And stay away from the windows." "No," Sarah said firmly. "If they're here for me, hiding won't help. Besides, I won't let you face them alone." The riders began their descent into the valley, and Sarah recognized several faces among them. Tom Miller, whose son she had tried to heal, Sheriff Garrett, who had stood by and watched while the mob dragged her to the hanging tree, and leading them all was Reverend Blackwood, the man who had proclaimed her a witch and called for her death. They rode right up to the cabin, their horses snorting and stamping in the cold air. Reverend Blackwood dismounted first, his black coat stark against the white snow that was beginning to accumulate on the ground. "Sarah Whitmore," he called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Come out here. We need to have words." Sarah stepped out of the cabin, Ayana close beside her. She could feel the tension radiating from him, like heat from a fire, and she knew that any sudden movement from the settlers could trigger a violence that would end with blood on the snow. "Reverend Blackwood," she said, keeping her voice steady, despite the fear coursing through her veins. "What brings you to my home?" "Your home." The Reverend's voice was filled with disgust. "This is not your home, woman. This is the wilderness, and you are living in sin with a savage. We've come to bring you back to civilization, to give you a chance to repent of your sins and return to the Christian community." "I am exactly where I belong," Sarah replied, lifting her chin. "I am married to Ayana, according to Comanche law, and this valley is our home. I have no intention of returning to Cedar Creek." Sheriff Garrett spat into the snow. "Married? You can't be married to a redskin. They're not even human. Not really. What you're doing here is an abomination in the eyes of God." Sarah felt Ayana stiffen beside her, and she placed a restraining hand on his arm. She knew he understood enough English to follow the conversation, and she could see the fury building in his dark eyes. "Ayana is more of a man than any of you," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "He saved my life when all of you would have let me die. He's shown me more kindness and respect than I ever received in Cedar Creek. And yes, I married him, because I love him, and he loves me." "Love." Reverend Blackwood's laugh was cold and bitter. "You've been bewitched, woman, seduced by the devil himself. But it's not too late. Come back with us, renounce this heathen union, and we'll help you find your way back to the light. And if I refuse," the Reverend's face hardened, "then you'll be considered an enemy of Christian civilization, and we'll treat you accordingly." It was a threat, plain and simple. Sarah felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. But she also felt something else, a fierce determination that surprised her with its intensity. "Then, I guess I'm your enemy," she said, "clearly because I'm not going anywhere." The tension that had been building finally snapped. Tom Miller, who had been silent until now, suddenly pulled his rifle from its scabbard. "Enough talk. If she won't come willingly, we'll take her by force." But Ayana was already moving, in one fluid motion. He had his knife in his hand, and was placing himself between Sarah and the mounted men. His voice, when he spoke, carried the deadly calm of a predator about to strike. "You will not touch my wife," he said in English that was accented but perfectly clear. If you try, I will kill you all. Sheriff Garrett's hand moved to his gun. 1 Indian against 8 white men. I don't think so, boy. What happened next would be burned into Sarah's memory forever. The sharp whistle that cut through the air like a blade. The sudden appearance of Comanche warriors on the ridges surrounding the valley. Dozens of them. Their war paint stark against the snow. Their weapons ready for battle. The settlers' horses began to rear and dance, sensing their riders' fear. Sarah saw the exact moment when the men realized they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. When their arrogance turned to terror, Chief Nokoni emerged from the tree line, his voice carrying Isley across the valley. You are on Comanche land, white men. You will leave now, or you will not leave at all. The standoff lasted for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Finally, Reverend Blackwood remounted his horse, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. This isn't over, Sarah, he called out. You can't hide behind your savage friends forever. Sooner or later, justice will find you. As the settlers rode away, Sarah felt both relief and dread. The immediate threat was over, but she knew the Reverend was right about one thing. This wasn't over, the storm was just beginning. Spring came early to the valley that year, but it brought with it news that chilled Sarah's heart more than any winter wind. A young Comanche brave named Swift Arrow arrived at dawn, his horse lathered with sweat and his face grim with the weight of the message. He carried. Sarah watched from the cabin doorway as he spoke rapidly to Ayanna in their native tongue. She didn't need to understand the words to know that something terrible had happened. The tension in Ayanna's shoulders, the way his hands clenched into fists, the sharp intake of breath that escaped him, all of it spoke of disaster. When Swift Arrow finally rode away, Ayanna stood motionless for a long moment, his back to her, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Sarah approached him slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. What is it? She asked softly. When he turned to face her, she saw something in his eyes that she had never seen before, a kind of desperate fury that spoke of pain too deep for words. The soldiers came to our winter camp 3 days ago, he said, his voice hoarse. They said they were looking for stolen cattle. But that was a lie. They were looking for me. For us. His voice broke slightly. They burned our lodges, Sarah. They killed women and children. My grandmother, ... Bright Moon, she died, trying to protect the little ones. Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Bright Moon, the gentle medicine woman who had married them, who had welcomed Sarah into the tribe despite the color of her skin, gone. And it was because of her, because of the love she and Ayanna shared. It's my fault, she whispered, the words torn from her throat. They came looking for me, and your people paid the price. No. Ayanna's voice was fierce as he gripped her shoulders. This is not your fault. This is the fault of men who see hatred where there should be love, who choose violence over understanding. You did not pull those triggers, Sarah. You did not light those fires. But Sarah could see the truth in his eyes, the knowledge that their love had indeed brought this catastrophe upon his people. The settlers of Cedar Creek had made good on their threat, bringing the army to help them track down the white woman, who had chosen to live among the savages. Chief Nokoni has called for a war council, Ayanna continued, his voice heavy with grief and rage. The young warriors want blood. They want to ride against every white settlement between here and the Rio Grande. And you? Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. I want to make them pay for what they've done, he said honestly. I want to see their towns burn as they burned our camp. But I also know that more killing will only bring more soldiers, more death. He looked at her with eyes that seemed to have aged years in the space of minutes. What we have built here, this life we've made together, it may not survive what's coming. Over the following days, the valley filled with Comanche warriors, arriving for the war council. Sarah watched them come, these proud, fierce men, who had lost everything to the endless hunger of white expansion. She saw the way they looked at her, not with hatred, exactly, but with a kind of cold assessment that made her skin crawl. She was the white woman whose love had brought disaster to their people. Some blamed her directly, whispering that she was a curse, a bad spirit sent to destroy them from within. Others defended her, pointing out that she had proven herself a healer and a loyal wife to one of their own. But even her defenders couldn't argue with the facts. The soldiers had come looking for her, and innocent people had died because of it. The war council itself was held in the ancient way, with the chiefs and war leaders sitting in a circle around a sacred fire. Sarah was not permitted to attend, but she could hear the heated voices carrying across the valley. The arguments that grew more passionate as the night wore on. When Ayana finally returned to their cabin near dawn, his face was grim. "What did they decide?" Sarah asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. "We are divided," he said warily. "Half want war, half want to move deeper into the territory where the white man cannot follow. Chief Nokani has managed to delay any action for now, but the young warriors are hungry for vengeance. And what do you want?" Ayana was quiet for a long moment, staring into the dying embers of their fire. "I want to take you away from here," he said finally. "Far away, where we can build a new life, where no one knows our story. But I cannot abandon my people in their time of need." Sarah felt her heart breaking as she realized the impossible choice that lay before them. If they stayed, their love would continue to be a source of division and danger for the tribe. If they left, Ayana would be abandoning his people when they needed him most. What if there was another way? She said suddenly, an idea forming in her mind. "What if I could convince the soldiers to leave your people alone? What if I could make them understand that the Comanche aren't their enemies?" Ayana looked at her as if she had suggested flying to the moon. "Sarah, these are not reasonable men. They are soldiers following orders, and their orders are to drive us from our lands by any means necessary. But what if I went to them? What if I surrendered myself and told them that I came willingly, that your people didn't take me captive? Maybe if they had me, they would leave the tribe alone." "No." The word came out like a gunshot. "Absolutely not. I will not let you sacrifice yourself for my people's sake. We will find another way." But even as he spoke, Sarah could see in his eyes that he knew there might not be another way. The storm that Chief Nokani had warned them about was finally upon them, and the price of their love was proving higher than either of them had imagined. Outside, the wind howled through the valley like the voices of the dead, and Sarah wondered if their love story was destined to end in tragedy after all. The decision was made for them 3 days later, when a massive column of blue-uniformed soldiers appeared on the eastern ridge. Sarah counted over 100 men, along with supply wagons and artillery pieces that gleamed dully in the morning sun. At their head rode a man she recognized from descriptions: Colonel Marcus Whitfield, the military commander who had made his reputation fighting Indians across the frontier. The War Council had been in session for hours when the soldiers appeared, and Sarah could see the immediate effect their presence had on the assembled warriors. The arguments stopped, replaced by a grim silence, as everyone understood that the time for talk had passed. Chief Nokani approached the cabin, where Sarah and Ayana waited, his weathered face etched with the weight of command. "The soldiers have sent a messenger," he said without preamble. "They want to parley. They say they will not attack if we surrendered the white woman who has been living among us." Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. "Just me. You and any warriors who aided in your capture," the chief replied. "They believe you were taken against your will, that you are a victim who needs to be rescued from savage captivity. And if we refuse..." Chief Nokani's expression was grim. "Then they will attack at dawn. They have enough men and firepower to destroy us all." The terrible mathematics of the situation were clear to everyone. 100 Comanche warriors, no matter how skilled and brave, could not stand against a full military column equipped with modern weapons. The soldiers would win, and when they did, the slaughter would be complete. "I have to go," Sarah said quietly. "No," Ayana said immediately. "We'll fight. We'll find a way to what?" Sarah interrupted, turning to face him. "To get everyone killed? To watch your people die because I was too selfish to do what needed to be done." She looked around at the faces surrounding her, warriors who had accepted her into their tribe, who had welcomed her as one of their own despite the color of her skin. Some of them had wives and children in the camp. All of them had families who would mourn their deaths. "I won't let that happen," she said firmly. "I won't let innocent people die because of me." The argument that followed was fierce and emotional. Ayana begged her to reconsider, to trust that they could find another way. Some of the warriors agreed with him, saying that they would rather die fighting than surrender one of their own to the white soldiers. But others, particularly the older men who had seen too much war, understood the cold logic of Sarah's position. "She speaks wisdom," said an elderly warrior named Grey Wolf. "Sometimes the greatest courage is knowing when to surrender." "This is not surrender," Chief Nokani said quietly. "This is sacrifice. And sacrifice must be chosen freely, not demanded by others." Sarah looked at Ayana, memorizing his face, the way his dark eyes held hers with such fierce love and desperation. She thought of all the moments they had shared in their valley, the quiet evenings by the stream, the gentle way he had taught her about his people's customs, the night they had been married under the stars. "I choose freely," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. I choose to protect the people I love. The parley took place at noon, with both sides sending representatives to a neutral spot halfway between the opposing forces. Sarah walked across the prairie grass with Chief Nocon and 2 war chiefs, while Colonel Whitfield approached with his adjutant and a man she recognized as Sheriff Garrett from Cedar Creek. "Miss Whitmore," Colonel Whitfield said as they met, his voice carrying the crisp authority of a professional soldier. "I am Colonel Marcus Whitfield. I've come to secure your release from these savages." "I was never captured," Colonel Sarah replied calmly. "I came here willingly. I am married to a Comanche warrior, and this is my home." The colonel's expression hardened. "You've obviously been brainwashed by your captors. No civilized white woman would choose to live among Indians of her own free will. I am completely in my right mind, Colonel, and I am making a choice to come with you now, not because I want to, but because I won't allow innocent people to die for my sake." She turned to Chief Noconi, speaking in the Comanche words that Ayana had taught her. "Tell my husband that I love him. Tell him that what we had was real, and beautiful, and worth all the pain that came with it." The chief nodded gravely. "I will tell him. And I will tell him that you died with honor, as a true daughter of the people." As the soldiers escorted her away, Sarah looked back once at the assembled warriors. In the distance, she could see Ayana standing apart from the others, his tall form silhouetted against the sky. Even from this distance, she could feel the intensity of his gaze, the love and anguish that connected them across the widening space. She had saved his people, but she had lost everything that mattered to her. As the soldiers' camp closed around her, Sarah wondered if love could truly conquer all, or if some prices were simply too high to pay. 5 years had passed since that terrible day, when Sarah had walked away from the valley and the man she loved. 5 years of living in a world that called her a hero for escaping from the Indians, while her heart remained with the people who had truly understood her. The war that everyone had feared never came. Colonel Whitfield, convinced that he had rescued a helpless captive, had withdrawn his forces after Sarah's surrender. The Comanche had melted back into the vast expanse of the territory, and an uneasy peace had settled over the frontier. Sarah had been sent to live with distant relatives in San Antonio, where she was expected to resume her life as a proper Christian woman. She went through the motions, attending church, participating in ladies' auxiliary meetings, accepting the sympathy of those who believed she had survived a terrible ordeal. But inside, she was dying a little more each day. The breaking point came on a warm spring morning when she received news that changed everything. A trader who dealt with the Comanche had brought word that Chief Noconi was dead, killed in a skirmish with Mexican soldiers far to the south. The news hit Sarah like a physical blow, but it was what the trader told her next that made her decision inevitable. "Funny thing about the chief's nephew," the trader said, not realizing the significance of his words. "Young warrior named Ayana. After you left, he just gave up, stopped eating, stopped speaking. The medicine men said he was dying of a broken heart. He's still alive, but barely. Living like a ghost in that valley where you used to stay." That night, Sarah made her choice. She gathered her few precious belongings, including the small pouch of herbs that Ayana had given her, and a piece of the binding cord from their wedding ceremony, and slipped away from San Antonio, under cover of darkness. The journey back to the valley took her 3 days of hard riding. She had stolen a horse from her relative's stable and traded her jewelry for supplies, burning every bridge behind her. She was done living a lie, done pretending to be someone she wasn't. The valley looked exactly as she remembered it, but smaller somehow, as if her absence had diminished its magic. The cabin she and Ayana had built together was still standing, though it showed signs of neglect. The garden they had planted was overgrown with weeds, and the stream seemed to run more quietly than before. She found him sitting by the water, so thin and still that for a moment she thought she was too late. His long black hair had streaks of premature gray, and his eyes held the hollow look of someone who had lost everything that mattered. "Ayana," she whispered, afraid that speaking too loudly might shatter the moment like glass. He looked up slowly, and she saw the exact moment when recognition dawned in his eyes. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then he was on his feet, and she was running toward him, and they were in each other's arms again, holding each other as if they could make up for 5 years of separation in a single embrace. "I thought you were dead," he whispered against her hair, his voice raw with emotion. "I thought I had lost you forever." "I couldn't stay away," she replied, tears streaming down her face. "I tried to live without you, but I couldn't. This is where I belong. You are where I belong." They talked through the night, sharing the pain and loneliness of their separation, the way they had both been haunted by what they had lost. Ayana told her about his people's struggles, how they had been forced to move deeper into the territory as more settlers arrived. Sarah told him about her life in San Antonio, the suffocating propriety that had nearly killed her spirit. "I know. There will be consequences," she said as dawn began to break over the valley. "I know that people will come looking for me again, but I'm done running from who I am. I'm done apologizing for loving you. And I am done letting fear dictate my choices." Ayana replied, "We may not be able to change the world, but we can choose how we live in it." Over the following months, they rebuilt their life together, with a deeper understanding of its preciousness. They restored the cabin, replanted the garden, and established a small trading post that served both white travelers and Comanche hunting parties. Word spread slowly that the valley was neutral ground, a place where people of all backgrounds could trade fairly and safely. It wasn't easy. There were still those who saw their union as an abomination, who whispered about the white woman who had gone native and the savage who had corrupted her. But there were also those who saw something different, a bridge between two worlds, a proof that love could transcend the artificial boundaries that men created. Sarah became known throughout the territory as a skilled healer who would treat anyone who came to her, regardless of their race or beliefs. Ayana used his knowledge of the land and his connections with various tribes to help prevent conflicts before they could escalate into violence. They never had children of their own, but they became foster parents to orphans from both communities. White children whose parents had died of disease or violence, and Comanche children who had lost their families in the endless cycle of raids and reprisals. On a warm evening in late summer, as they sat by the stream watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked Ayana. "The choices we made, the prices we paid." He considered the question seriously, as he always did. "I regret the pain we caused others," he said finally. "I regret the people who died because of the fear our love inspired. But I do not regret loving you, Sarah. I do not regret choosing you over the expectations of others, even if it costs us everything." "It didn't cost us everything," he replied, taking her hand in his. "It cost us the approval of people who never really knew us. It cost us the comfort of living unexamined lives. But it gave us something more precious than gold. It gave us the chance to be truly ourselves, to love without compromise, to build something beautiful in a world that often seems determined to tear beauty down." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sarah felt a deep satisfaction settle into her bones. They had weathered the storm, survived the tests, and emerged stronger for having faced them together. Their love story hadn't been easy, but it had been real and honest, and ultimately triumphant. Years later, when travelers would ask Sarah about her life, about the choices she had made, and the prices she had paid, she would smile and tell them the truth, that love was not always easy, but it was always worth fighting for. That the heart knew no boundaries of race or culture, only the deep recognition of a kindred spirit. And that sometimes, the greatest courage was not in conforming to the world's expectations, but in having the strength to be exactly who you were meant to be. In the valley, where a white girl had once hung from a tree, and a Comanche warrior had lifted her down, love had indeed conquered all, not through magic or divine intervention, but through the simple, powerful choice to value what mattered most above all else. And that, Sarah knew, was the most powerful ending of all.